accustomed as we are to public speaking now.
Okay, well, Joanne's getting the slides ready. I threw her for a loop and said I wanted to change the order. I want to be the anchor woman. So,
Clean up here.
right. So I've asked Brian to go first. Brian Smith is a senior partnership developer for NC State in innovation and economic development. Brian has had an incredible career. He's been involved in natural sciences. He's been involved in marine sciences, including fisheries. He's been involved in offshore energy development, and now NC State Economic Development Office. I think the one thing that you will notice about the three of us, the one thing we have in common is a very low tolerance for boredom. Brian just changes careers entirely. Brad and I go out and get another degree. So there's a variety of things going on here. But we are all going to focus today on collaboration and new and different ways for developing collaborations. And so we're going to spend 5 minutes each, and wave it if we go over 5 minutes, only 5 minutes each, introducing you to what our job is, what we're doing, who we are now, not the past, but who we are now. We get to change our identities every couple of years. And then at the end, we're going to talk about a little bit about what makes the collaborations work, and what are the pitfalls and hurdles that can cause your collaboration to fall apart or to be less productive than you might like it to be. So you can think as we go along. And okay, Brian, you're ready to go. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you for the introduction. I promise there is a common thread throughout all of those different things. It may seem like a long and twisting path, but there is a common thread through the path, and what the thread is essentially is building relationships, and that's essentially what I think we're going to be focusing on. And the current role that I'm in, rather than going back through that history, but to focus on where we are now, is developing industry collaborations at NC State is the role that I'm in, and in this Industry Alliances group. So I'm a senior partnership developer there, focused on essentially building sponsored research relationships with industry. So a lot of what I do is serve as the front door for the university for industry partners. Make no mistake, our biggest asset in terms of those relationships is our faculty. Many of those relationships come from there. We also do have a number of partners that, I guess the easiest way to say it is cold call us or get to us from what we have as a concierge type of email. And we catch those and then push them out to the appropriate places on campus or retain them if it's going to be sponsored research. But really, that is the core mission, is facilitating that increase in sponsored research from industry sponsors. And that really is a business development function. Working closely with faculty and staff to do the things that you see there on the bulleted list. I mean, a lot of times we do feel like like we're playing matchmaker, and that really is a big role. And it is trying to maximize potential out of collaborations that we see. Often you'll have a relationship that is between one principal investigator and one particular R&D person at a company. We would like to make sure that if there is reason to, and it's appropriate to, and there's interest from both of those parties, to try and expand that relationship if we can, and to do that anywhere from an initial inquiry to helping them through the process of getting an agreement in place. Although that's not our primary responsibility, that's the responsibility signatory authority-wise of another office, but we can help facilitate that process all the way through helping retain partners and grow those relationships, as I said. And there's multiple opportunities for engagement at the university, whether it's a company interested in recruiting talent, hiring interns, senior design projects. You can read the list all the way through. As I said, my major focus is doing that in sponsored research. So when these other inquiries come in, I act as a conduit and facilitate the interaction, push an inquiry out to our career services folks when that makes sense, or to whichever other responsible party makes sense up there, and then work with colleagues across the campus that have specific roles in their particular colleges that might do the industry type of liaison work that I do. One of them is sitting right down here with me, and I'll introduce her in just a little while when we get to that, which is College of Ag and Life Sciences. So we'll do that now. Deborah Thompson is a director of partnership development in our College of Ag and Life Sciences and does exactly what I do, but focused on cows. So some of the examples of partnerships that we have that I focus on may not necessarily be as germane to this audience. We wanted to make sure that we put some things up that were from the types of relationships that Deborah is working on. I have been running behind and acting as an account manager for relationships like Eastman Chemical, to some degree Nike. We just signed an agreement with SAS, and that is something that I'm getting more and more into and getting that relationship sort of fully fleshed out. Deborah is working on the relationships that are coming through College of Ag and Life Sciences, and one of the interesting ones here with Cottle Farms is a new product that's in 1,200 stores now that we basically helped in the processing of muscadine grapes in a new processing process itself, actually, to get to retain flavor and actually get it into a juice. Another is with a company called Islander, and that's more of a poultry feed work that's being done in Peru and looking at using plant extracts as additives for poultry feed. And the final in Bayer Crop Science is basically a workforce development pipeline where there's a back and forth between Bayer Crop Science and supporting students and being able to, in some ways, test drive, but basically they're supporting graduate student funding. And I think that is one of the things that I want as a common theme that people get here, is that the type of role that I'm in, that Deborah is in, one of the nice things that comes out of it is that classically I've always seen academia, especially a PhD pipeline, as people getting training to teach them to be academics. Whereas there's so much need to put people into a situation where they're getting training and what it would be like to work on the industry side of the equation and see if they've got a desire to do one or the other and give them that opportunity. So something like that partnership with Bayer Crop Science, and we have many others across campus, is very important in my line of work and to what I'm doing. So specific questions to these, if you've got interest in the details of these particular partnerships, I would point you to Deborah over lunch, or if you've got them now, I'll point you to Deborah now as well. But I'll leave it at that, and we can move on to our next intro. Here's my contact information if folks are interested in that.
Okey doke. Let's see if I hit this again, will the next one come up? Okay, sorry. So I'm Brad Walters.
Go ahead, say who you are.
I'm Brad Walters. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at RTI, and I thank the organizers for the opportunity to be here. The particular partnership I'm going to talk a little bit about is one with the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We partnered in the Institutional Clinical and Translational Science Award. I still can't say that without reading it. The CTSA, which goes by the moniker at UNC, NC Tracks. There are 62 of those CTSA awards that have come out of the NIH over in waves over 5 years, and UNC had received one back in the mid-2000s. In the recompete opportunity, for the first time, it was possible for an academic institution to partner with another institution that wasn't an academic institution itself, a degree-granting institution. And RTI and UNC partnered in this, and to my knowledge, actually, we're the only non-educational institution that is a formal partner in one of these grants, which are infrastructure grants. They are designed for translational, to speed the translational science process, getting drugs and devices and methodologies from the bench to the bedside. It takes a long time to get something through the FDA, a device or a drug, longer for a drug. And then, at least by some counting, it takes 17 years from the time a product or an invention is approved until it becomes common practice in the community of physicians. So there's room for improvement there. And the NIH has been trying to encourage that all along. So the CTSA awardees are supposed to provide core resources across that entire spectrum, early stage drug development, device development, basically through introduction into practice, comparative effectiveness research, a whole host of different things. Just a really quick word about RTI. So we are actually the anchor tenant of Research Triangle Park. The mothership is not far from here. We are an independent nonprofit institute that does research, development, and technical consulting for governments and private companies globally. Our mission statement is to improve the human condition by turning knowledge into practice, which is what we do, but that's not a very prescriptive mission statement, so cover a lot of ground. We're very similar to a university in some ways, but we don't have a specific teaching mission or function, though we do that. So why is RTI doing this, given that it isn't specifically a university? Well, I think at the heart of it, it's the belief that if you put the right people together, you get synergistic results, or the 1 + 1 = 3 equation. Part of the monies, 10% of the monies that the NIH gives to UNC and that they give to RTI can be applied toward pilot awards. And those are basically opportunities to fund internal researchers to do work that may be difficult to fund on a regular NIH, that may be preparatory for an R01 or another grant, or preparatory to doing the last experiment or a proof of principle thing that might interest an industry partner in a technology or a device. So that's a big thing for us. Obviously, there are opportunities for training and mentorship that go both ways, RTI to UNC and UNC back. One of our we're not a corporation, one of our institutional goals is to increase the collaboration that we have with the founding universities. RTI was actually founded by a coalition of government and business leaders and leaders from the 3 major research institutions that define the triangle, NC State, Duke, and UNC Chapel Hill. And it also, as a member of the CTSA, as the NIH is more and more interested in network-wide activities across the CTSAs to try to leverage their effectiveness more than just locally, that it enables RTI to be a part of that process. So this is a nice Ptolemaic worldview that puts NC Tracks at the center, but it's kind of useful, I think, in a crude way. In the outside ring, we have the world. There's the community in which we all live. There's the clinical networks that exist and we hope will form, and the CTSA consortium itself. The next ring in would be our CTSA, the University of North Carolina, and RTI International. And actually, NCA&T is a planning partner, not on this slide, but is also there. And then this is a sort of a blow up of the inside, and the specifics aren't really critical. There are 3 different things in which UNC is particularly interested, general areas. Transformative, the encouragement and advancement of transformative technologies, the development of drugs, devices, and diagnostics to get out into practice, and then comparative effectiveness. The inner dots there are 11 resources and services which UNC brings to the table. The specifics aren't critical here. There are 4 services that RTI brings to the table. And the way that worked was when the application was being written, we were asked to provide a list of potential things we could cooperate with. And we gave them a list of 10 or 12, and the 4 they chose are there. I mean, they're early phase drug discovery, metabolomics, a rare disease registry, and a preclinical regulatory support, all of which are RTI strengths. Again, the details aren't important here, but I think a key to success is integration across the 2 institutions. I mean, we're not co-located. RTI is just a few miles down the road on Cornwallis, and UNC is in Chapel Hill. But the PI for the whole grant is Marshall Runge. He is a cardiologist at UNC. The deputy PIs, the co-PIs, are John Buse, who's at UNC, and Don Bailey, who is actually at RTI. And Don wrote a large part of the grant application, I believe. So there's an executive committee which comprises about 6 people, and again, Don Bailey is the RTI representative. And these are just a number of critical operational committees at UNC Chapel Hill, and those are the lists of RTI people that sit on those committees. I mean, often we go to UNC for these. Sometimes the UNC folks come out to RTI. They like that. Parking's a lot easier. As one of the former speakers mentioned, we have I don't know how to go back. Oh, I guess
You did.
I did. Well, I didn't mean to go back. Who knows? We have a project manager, Dr. Lisa Getland, and she has been key to helping pull together all these multiple parts. On the right side, we have listings of, and now that's burned out. We have listings of RTI committees, and the key point, the take-home point there is that actually we have on the steering committee, which is one of the main RTI inputs into this process, we have Tim Carey sitting on that committee. And so I would say that, just to wrap up quickly, the key success factors, in my opinion, are buy-in at the tops of the organizations. And so, Barbara Entwistle, the Vice Chancellor for Research at UNC, is a big supporter of this, and Wayne Holden, our CEO at RTI, is a big supporter of this. Integration from the top on down, and you saw some of that in the previous organizational slide. Key to something like this is the selection of complementary activities with which to collaborate. I mean, there are plenty of things which UNC and RTI compete upon. Those are not part of this process. Communication throughout both organizations is really critical at the beginning of such a partnership. I mean, it's perhaps less so if you're both co-located, but we spent a lot of time, Dr. Getland and I, doing dog and pony shows at both RTI and at multiple stakeholder groups at UNC Chapel Hill. That was a big part of our first 6 months in this process. I think structural incentives for collaboration, when you can build them in, are really useful. And the key there for us is the pilot study program. So in a nutshell, the pilot studies awards are $50,000 to a researcher to do whatever has been approved in the pilot. And there's a study section very much modeled on the NIH study sections, which makes that determination. How it works is that the researcher gets $25,000 from the CTSA funds, but then she has to get another $25,000 from her department. So if there is a joint application with a co-PIs from RTI and UNC, no departmental match is required. And so it's a little carrot to build into the system, and that, I think, has been helpful. And then, as is always the case in everything in life, having the right people is critical. It's a little harder to define the right people, but often you know them when you see them. And I think that wraps up my 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
My
ma'am.
turn. Okay. I'm Fran Ligler. I am relatively new to this area. I've been here 1.5 years after 28 years in government, and before that, I retired from DuPont. So this is I won't say which career this is, but I've had a few. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the joint department between UNC Chapel Hill and NC State. We are trying to make the House united here. We have 22 primary core members in our faculty and BME, approximately equally divided between the two institutions. We have over 100 graduate students. Again, this is one graduate program that spans both universities. We have 2, right now, separate undergraduate programs, but we are working on trying to change that model till eventually we have a single graduate program with multiple tracks to accommodate the interests of all our undergraduate students. That's going to be an ongoing process that involves getting accreditation for the UNC part. So the idea is we are very, very, very collaborative as a group, and we have a reputation for being collaborative, so people come to us to partner. So not only do we partner between the School of Medicine and the School of Engineering, but we have very active partnerships going on in the School of Pharmacy at Chapel Hill, in the School of Veterinary Science, in the School of Textiles, as well as other departments, both in the medical school, the School of Arts and Sciences, and at both institutions, and also the other departments in engineering. one of the things you learn as a biomedical engineer is you don't do anything by yourself. The problems that we tackle are way too complex for anybody with only one disciplinary expertise to handle. So we have to appreciate what other people can do, what other fields of knowledge can help us learn to do, and how to find creative solutions to the problems involved in improving human health. This actually has been one of our biggest strengths. It's been one of the reasons that we're revolutionizing engineering in terms of attracting more women and underrepresented minorities to this field. It is very, very inclusive, and it's the fact that most bioengineering departments in the country are 50% women among their student bodies is spilling over to other fields of engineering. Our particular department has 5 major areas that we're trying to focus on in terms of research and educational experiences for the students outside the basics of what they need to know. I'm just going to show them briefly here. I'm not going to talk about any of them, but these are the focus of much of the work that goes on. And as you can see, again, they're quite broad. We can't do any of it by ourselves. We need expertise from the engineering to the life sciences to the translational aspects and corporate involvement. I think you're going to hear a little bit later on from Katerina Galeppi on some of her corporate interactions. The other thing that we do is there is a very heavy emphasis on entrepreneurship in our program. Our undergraduates start companies. Our undergraduates submit patent disclosures and get their patents licensed. We even have some competitions for funding that let them take 6 months just to explore what their companies can do if that's what they're so inclined. One of the things that I think we really appreciate in our department is that our students can do anything. They can go into academia, they can go into companies, they can go into regulatory affairs, they can go into government offices. We are not limited to, while we teach them research, we expose them to business and policy and other kinds of enrichment to the extent that they're interested in it. So we want them to know there's a big world out there, that the kinds of expertise that they're getting is important for sustainability of life on the planet. And there are lots of ways that they can contribute to making this happen. The skills of engineering and science teach you to learn, they teach you to do analytical thinking, they teach you to find creative problem solutions, and what you do with it after you leave is wide open. Okay, so that is all I'm going to say about my current job. Now I'm going to open the floor for discussion, and just as food for thought, I want to show you this slide. These are devices that have all been commercialized as a result of creations that have come out of my lab when I was at the Naval Research Lab. They are all sensors. They are all designed for use at point of care, and they span the gamut from environmental monitoring to homeland security to infectious disease diagnosis to drugs of abuse, whatever. Just detecting things that can kill you. I did anything other than lead. I don't do lead. But so the devices are, we learn a lot about systems integration, how to take the knowledge from a variety of different people and develop a prototype. That prototype goes nowhere without a commercial partner. We have to work with people to license the technology, to teach them how to do the knowledge. But then it's up to them to do the marketing and take it on to the next step. Many of these systems are no longer available. They were available for a while, and the reasons are very broad. They range from the company mismanaged their funding and ran out of money after getting a great head start and regulatory approval. The company just simply didn't have the resources or the marketing know-how. In one case, the company added their IP. We didn't have the foreign IP, and they transitioned it to Canon in Japan, and the device was a big hit in Japan, but never made it out of Japan. Back to the U.S. because Japan didn't want to pay for the U.S. patents. There's a whole bunch of a variety of reasons of why the partnership works and why they don't, and many of them were very unobvious to somebody who was embedded primarily in an academic experience. So what I want to emphasize that as part of a team, the resources and the expertise are obvious elements of a successful team. Knowing your customer and what the market is cannot be underestimated. And the sooner you can bring that customer into the process of designing your product, the better off your partner's going to do. Whether it's whether it's the kind of customer you heard of from these two guys or the customer that these devices were intended for. The other thing is, I want to bring up your competitor is a very, very valuable resource. It is very hard to move into an area where there is no market. Right. That's where the most creative breakthrough solutions happen, but they're incredibly difficult. This, I don't know if this device, we flew a biosensor to detect biological warfare agents in 1996 and proved we could do it. The military had no concept of operations for using it and didn't have a clue what to do with it. So it sat there for 4 years. So, this is the kind of example. If you don't have a market, it's very hard to create one. If you have an emerging market, there are likely to be other people trying to hit that same market. If they get there first, look really carefully at what their customers say about them, what they like, what they don't like, and find the gaps where the opportunity exists. Your competitor may have done you an incredible favor by being the first one out there and letting you do it better. Okay? So, and also realize we're not in a static world. The market evolves, the customers get more sophisticated. Customers for these biosensors 15 years ago were really excited about how they worked and what they did. Now they could care less. All they want is actionable information that's reliable, that they can make decisions based on. The market evolves, the customer evolves, the needs change, and the technology changes. We've made tremendous use of the technology in photonics that's been developed by the communications industry. That technology is just going crazy right now in terms of what we could borrow from that world for the healthcare applications. So be very aware of what's going on in fields that seem to have nothing to do with yours, because they may pull your feet out of the fire when you need them. So those are the thoughts I'm going to throw out for you. And now we're going to open it up to discussion. We can focus on these questions, or if you have another question that you'd like to ask one of the panelists, I should shut up. Can I have a question from somebody in the audience?
Here we go.
Yes.
Yes. So what is the significance of those stars on the previous page?
Oh, those. When I made this slide 2 years ago, those were the things you could still go out and buy. Some of them are consumer, some of them military applications. The one in the lower left is mostly used to float around harbors guided by a PDA and tell you if there's a mine in your harbor. That's probably not something you want to buy.
You don't want to need anyway.
You don't want to need. But the others were all commercial products for civilian users. One of the things I learned very early on was not to get a company excited about selling anything to the Department of Defense, that they had to have a civilian market because the Department of Defense was way too flaky in terms of its reliability to buy your products. So everything was dual, triple, quadruple use. Yes?
At both NC State as well as UNC, it looks like you have a lot of emerging technologies that are taking initial stages. What do you do to help these entrepreneurs take the next step?
Sure. So, I mean, full disclosure, I'm an RTI employee, not a UNC employee, but they have a variety of organizational or structures within the university to help an entrepreneur. There is and some of that's run, most of that's actually run through NC Tracks. There's the Kickstart program, which helps scientists and engineers that have an interesting idea figure out if there's a market and a path to commercialization. And I believe there are some monies available, some small monies available for that outside of NC Tracks. Also, I mean, there are a whole bunch of folks out in the community with which UNC has partnered, and so frequently, I mean, they will try to hook up an entrepreneur who has an idea with some experienced business person, maybe who has come out of that market space, but who can give them advice. There's actually pretty good structure. I'm sorry, I'm not the best person to tell you all the the specifics. But UNC is very interested in spinning stuff out.
If you want to talk about state.
Sure. And your question was specifically to technologies that sort of have been developed to a degree, right? It's getting it to the next step.
A ton of new companies formed out of biomedical engineering. For these students, how do these students take the next step?
So, at least from our end, there are a couple of areas, not just specific to students, but whether it's faculty or students that have potential things they want to move forward. We've got a very active Office of Technology Transfer. We've got reps from Tech Transfer here, and I think the director sits on a panel this afternoon as well. So, direct you to them for some specific questions if you have them. But a couple of things that I can mention is we've got a new venture services program that helped with 10 startups last year and provides the basic support that folks need in that arena. There's another thing that I would mention in our Chancellor's Innovation Fund that provides seed funding for, it's not seed funding, it's funding to take an idea that may have been developed, but the funding that was developed with, especially if it was on federal funds, is done, doesn't necessarily exist to take it to the commercialization phase so that people can write proposals into that fund to be able to take it to the next level. So the specific numbers on the success of that are not those that I have off the top of my head, although I know it's successful and have seen some slides on it, but I know that the folks that are either in the room already or will be here this afternoon can give you a little bit more of the specifics on it. But those are two examples of how we're very actively trying to work in that space.
Question down here.
Brad, how do you deal with IP issues in tracks between RTI?
That was
Can
something
you
that.
repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. The question was how do we deal with IP issues at UNC and RTI? And that was embedded, it was implicit in one of my points, but I neglected to say anything about it. I think that's a really good question. And so early on in this process, the IP counsel for RTI and his counterpart at UNC sat down and crafted language that is a sort of an overarching agreement on the sharing of IP between UNC and RTI. So that is, it's more of a framework than a specific template, because each and every spin out or product or whatever is a one-off to some degree or another. So the agreement is basically an agreement to agree, and there could be relationship. I mean, it could look, it could be 50-50. It could be a pure license from one to another. I mean, it's a very complicated world. But early on, this was a concern from both sides, and so this was signed into action right around the time that the grant money became available, so that we took that off the table as an issue at the very start, and that's important. Thank you.
Back there?
But you didn't find later, I mean, because this is one that has progressed quite some ways, that there weren't difficulties with that? Because, I mean, I know a lot of times people do put on the table, we'll just come to that, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
it,
Sometimes it's not very.
yeah, in one of my iterations, I was a VC, and I'm well aware of that problem. But fortunately, I mean, again, it's the people somewhat. The IP council from the two sides are both intelligent and reasonable people who recognize that, more can be accomplished by sharing resources and growing the pie rather than having a fixed percentage of the pie necessarily. I mean, I don't want to underestimate that, but there've been a couple of agreements that have been finalized, and there can't have been too much trouble, or I would have heard about it. But I mean, it's a question of managing expectations, and that's always unique to every deal.
I would suggest too, from my experience before I came down here, that it is very possible to craft agreements beforehand. I was involved in about probably 15 different cooperative research and development agreements with companies where we spelled out what would happen with the IP that was developed under the agreement as we worked together to accomplish a specific statement of work. This can be done. It can be done well. It's not that hard. As long as everybody is working in good faith, it is not that hard.
But the real key is that
Do it in
beforehand.
advance. Do it
I
in
mean,
advance.
I have been involved in a number of cases where ex post facto there really wasn't a very good framework or document, and those are just nightmares. So I mean, we really believe on getting it right before the first discussions of potentially protected ideas occur.
I would certainly support both of those in the industry alliances role. I mean, it's not our job necessarily to negotiate the agreements. It's our job to make sure that, I think one of the most important things going into the negotiation of the agreement, that you've established what the mutual benefit is way up front, and that you've got the right people in that dialogue, such that by the time you're ever at a point where you're looking at an agreement, you've already discovered, well, which agreement should we be looking at? What elements need to be in that agreement? What are the things that are going to come up? What is it that we can a priori determine are going to be potential things that are going to come up in that department or in that issue down the line? So again, do we have the right people around the table? What are the issues that are potentially here? What is it that we can put in place to make sure that we retain not only what people have sort of legally, but that we're focused as much on the tact as we are on the tech in the whole process.
I mean, if you're not
Yes.
successful, it doesn't matter how good the agreement is.
And it has to be done fairly fast.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know RTI with international in your title,
Mhm.
you cover that span, but I'm interested in the universities and how global partnerships play into your plans or your current actions. Do you proactively look for global partners, or is it more of a responsive and reactive mode that you're
To date, it's been more of a, at least from my perspective, in 18 months in, it's been more of a reactive mode. And many of the larger partners that I mentioned that we're working with certainly have international presence. What our intention is in getting down the road is to be more proactive, and I think that that'll become more of a part of what we're doing as we go forward.
How do you
And-
think that would work?
In terms of whether I think it'll be successful or
No,
mechanistically.
the process, I mean, do you have international offices, is it sitting at home scanning things and looking for partners and looking for matches?
I think it's more the latter, yeah, for us in particular. I mean, right now, we have companies that are large multinationals that are contacting us from their headquarters in various countries, and generally they're coming to us. So there may be an opportunity for us to be more proactive in that arena in the future.
And as far as the BME department, we are certainly already have an international presence. We have faculty that spend time overseas on a regular basis. It's one of our strategic goals is to increase our global presence. We have collaborations with global companies already. And I think what this is going to do to us or for us in the IP area is push us to make sure we have foreign patents filed as well as the U.S. patent filings, which they won't do without a partner, a corporate partner. So, it's a kind of cyclical endeavor. But I think it's very important. I think we have to be global these days. We can't just be local.
And I think one other thing that I would add to it from the NC State end is, sitting on Centennial campus and having the research campus that we do right across the street from our main campus, and having that be a leader in research campuses, there's been discussion around sort of joining up and sistering with research campuses in other parts of the world, and creating some relationships there, such that we would be able to increase the amount of partners and the interaction between the partners, the ones that are sitting at those sister research parks and ours. And I think that's an idea we'll continue to explore as we get more into that proactive mode.
Well, we have a lot more things we could talk about, but I'm getting the nod that lunch is getting cold, and I don't want to keep you from lunch, but you are welcome to come up and talk to any of us over the lunch hour or any time during the rest of the day.
I'm actually going to add one more very short story. I'm going to take prerogative from
Okay.
And I so appreciate you talk about, Brian, about having an active tech transfer office, right? I've chatted with a number of you for about 25 years. I lived in Princeton, New Jersey. And without naming, there's a school there. And I had a wonderful panel at one time years ago, and I invited a person who at the time was running their tech transfer office. And the person said, well, what should I talk about? I said, well, everyone would be interested in what you do when a scientist has a breakthrough. What do you help them? How do you help them to, do whatever they need to do, file the patent or whatever? He said, help them? The person said. And he said, well, if they come in and demand it about 10 times, then we try to do something. So having an active center, being proactive, these are really good style points, and I appreciate that.
Can I add one
Sure.
thing to that? Colton, could you raise your hand at least so that people know who you are? So if folks have questions, we had one rep at least from our wonderful tech transfer office sitting here in the audience now. And as I said, Kelly Sexton, who's the director of tech transfer, sits on a panel this afternoon. But I have found our tech transfer office incredibly great to work with, and have developed a lot of good relationships there, as well as with our sponsored programs office. So as the industry alliances end of things, I'm focused on intellectual capital. They are the ones that have to wrestle over intellectual property. I build the relationships and do a lot of the finding of mutual benefit, and these guys end up having to make sure that we can actually hammer out a way to realize that value at the end of the day. So I appreciate working with them very much.
Thank you, and now for lunch.